Hi, everybody, and welcome. Come on in. We are waiting for people to onboard into our webinar. We're going to get started in just a moment. In the meantime, if you want to get a cup of coffee, sit down, check some emails just for a minute. We'll be starting momentarily. And welcome to all of you who haven't heard my voice yet. My name is Rachel McIntosh, and we're going to be starting in about 30 seconds. We're waiting for a few more people to onboard into our webinar today. It always takes a few minutes for people to come on in because of the Zoom lag and also because of, just life stuff. People are sometimes a couple minutes late. So, welcome to everybody who is currently coming on in. We're going to get started very, very soon. My name is Rachel McIntosh. I'm going to be hosting this webinar today. And in the meantime, why don't you just sit back and relax for about 20 more seconds and we will get started momentarily. And I'm just gonna keep talking until then. Welcome to everybody who hasn't been welcomed yet. We're very, very happy to have you here today. And we're gonna be starting in just a moment. We have a great webinar for you today, so I'm really, really excited that you're here. We are just waiting for a few more people. We'll probably start in just a moment, but if you haven't been welcomed yet, welcome now. And today's webinar is going to be fantastic, great. So make sure you're nice and comfortable and you have your coffee and everything that you need to get started here. And actually, I think we're 2 minutes past the hour. So, 3 minutes, in fact. So let's go for it. Hello, everyone, and officially welcome to our webinar today at Finance Magnates. My name is Rachel McIntosh, and I am a podcast host at Finance Magnates, and I'm going to be moderating this discussion today, which is all about starting and scaling your business in Latin America, everything you need to know. And of course, I'm so excited to have these two panelists with me here today. Igor Costa Lorenzo, who's the head of enterprise sales at PayRetailers, and Jonathan House, who's the head of enterprise partnerships at PayRetailers. I'm going to let both of these guys introduce themselves more thoroughly in just a moment, but before then, a few quick housekeeping matters. So today our discussion is going to last for about 45 minutes, and after we're done talking amongst the three of us, we're going to open up the floor for questions. So we would love to hear from you during today's presentation. If you have a question for these guys at any point during this webinar, please feel free to send it through and we will do our best to answer it. If we don't get to it by the end of our webinar today, we'll do our best to follow up with you afterward. And also a quick FYI, this webinar will be available on demand after today's live session. So if you miss anything, don't worry, you'll have access to the webinar and as well as a little bit of information about more webinars that are upcoming and that sort of thing. And last but not least, sharing is caring. So make sure you share today's webinar on your social media channels. Do a little screenshot, let people know that you're here, let people know what you're up to. And without any further ado, I'm going to ask both of my panelists to introduce themselves, starting with Jonathan.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Rachel, for the introduction. As Rachel mentioned, my name's Jonathan. I've been working for PayRetailers now for around 7 months, but have been in the fintech industry for around 7 years now. At PayRetailers, I'm responsible for financial services and the gaming industries. And yeah, so looking for merchants in those areas and advising them how best that they can operate their businesses in Latin America.
Great, and my name is Igor. I've been working at PayRetailers also about 7 months. Started a few days after Jonathan. Working in fintech for about 6 years now. Used to work at PayPal, and at PayRetailers I'm responsible for all the enterprise partnerships.
Great, and thank you both for being here today. So let's just dive right in. What is so challenging about the Latin American market?
Well, first of all, I think people kind of underestimate the size. One of my colleagues showed me once like the outlining of Mexico and put it over Europe, and it's like 1/3 of Europe in terms of the size of the country. It can be really tough to enter in the Latin American market because many people want to apply their like business strategies from Europe or the US to emerging markets like Mexico or Colombia, but there are a few barriers. Could be the language, culture gaps, local regulations, and also some restrictions that you have to be aware of. And there are like more than 17 countries in total. Well, what we've seen in the last years at PayRetailers is that especially e-commerce in LATAM is growing strong, 30% year on year. And many countries now in LATAM, they have adapted and developed new payment methods, alternative payment methods, independent of each region. But they're working really well over there. And Jonathan and I will talk a little bit more about these alternative payment methods in a bit.
Sure. No, I think to add to what Igor said, while it is difficult to enter the Latin American market, there are some misconceptions with it. Some outdated thoughts about that Latin America, they're low earners, that there's poor solutions, that setup is really difficult. And while that can be true, with regulation, legal requirements, these kind of things, having the right partner on board, to hold your hand through that, as Igor mentioned, Latin America is growing year on year exponentially, and it's a really good opportunity for anybody looking to enter.
Right, and both of you touched on this fact that it's sort of a patchwork of different regulations, and that it's a little bit more challenging than a place like the United States or the European Union because there are so many different localized regulations and that sort of thing. So, how do merchants establish connections with local suppliers?
Well, so I mean, if a merchant was to go directly into Latin America, they'd have to consider a number of different things. I mean, starting with opening a bank account, which country is it that they want to enter? Do they have local entities there? Do they have a local presence? If not, that may be required in order to open such a thing. And then with the payment methods, as Igor mentioned, Latin America, there's 17 countries, and each of those countries is very different from one another. And while, payments as a whole is reasonably straightforward, to understand the different markets and the methods in those markets and which should be used, is, it's quite a task. I mean, for example, there are bank transfers, and there's a large number to choose from, and from one country to another, one country might need the bank transfer, whereas another might go for cash methods. I mean, Igor can say a bit more about the cash methods.
Yeah. So for, let's say, for Europeans, it's a interesting way to pay, because when I want to buy something online, to be honest, I don't want to go to a store to do anything, because that's why I'm buying online. What happens a lot in many countries is that people, they either get paid out in cash by their employer, or they just like to have the cash at home, and they use that to pay for their online goods. So how it works is that someone can go online, go to the checkout of the merchant, and selects one of those cash payment methods. And an example that I will give is Mexico, for example. You select the cash payment method, we generate a QR code or a barcode, and with that code, you can go to an OXXO, to a 7-Eleven, to a Walmart, to like a local pharmacy. There is a big network of shops and pharmacies and supermarkets that accept those things. They scan it physically in the store, and after that, you pay in cash, and as a merchant, you will get the confirmation that everything has been paid.
That is so remarkable. So why is there such a heavy reliance on cash? Just as a little aside here, I'm curious.
I mean, I think from country to country it varies in reason. I mean, we touch on it a little bit later, but if you look at Argentina, for example, I think that the trust in the banking system isn't very high, and therefore when people get paid their salaries, a lot of people will go and take that money straight out of banks in order that they have the cash. I mean, if you look at other countries, there's a variety of reasons. There's underbanked people who may be getting paid in cash. There's the lack of trust in the banking system, but there's multiple different reasons, and this is one thing that we help merchants when they're looking at different geographies to help them understand why it is in that area that a customer might want to use cash, what they should be looking for, and yes.
Okay, so just like it's a case by case basis depending on
Exactly.
which region you're in. Okay, gotcha. So who can companies look to for support when they are navigating this sort of complex region?
There are multiple ways you could take. Like one of them is maybe what many people would do is you can go to a consulting company. You can ask for assistance. They will advise you, and I mean the work still needs to be done in the end. But looking at how we advise our merchants, the process would look a little bit like this. So mostly Jonathan, me, or someone else from our team, we will first need to understand, what do you want to do? Where do you want to go? And what is your understanding of the Latin American markets? So from that moment, we will create a plan based on the information you give us, and we will try to advise you like where, how, when, etc. You can start going live. We take you hand in hand with the compliance process, with the legal process, etc. And when the integration is done, you can go live. What we normally do then is that one of our account managers will help you in the upcoming months and years. Will be a dedicated person to you, looking after new payment methods, new countries, maybe some changes, some A/B testing that needs to be done in terms of getting like a high conversion. And that is how we would advise our merchants.
I think just to add to what Igor said, with PayRetailers, what we do is it's having the understanding, it's having the feet on the ground. I mean, PayRetailers is a member of fintech associations in every one of the countries that we operate. So not only can we advise merchants in terms of the legislation at that point in time, but we also get the heads up of things that are going to change in order to be prepared, and in order to position the merchant in the right place, so that as and when those changes come into place, that they can make the changes needed.
I see. So tell me a little bit about the specifics of what this supports looks like. So we know that basically, if you're going to enter this market, you need to have somebody who really is an expert on each local area. What does that support look like on a practical level? What's the specific financial support and advice that they need?
Yes, I mean, what we do is, so we give the advice from market to market. We have people in each of the countries who advise us as a sales team, but also the account management team. So when a merchant does come live with PayRetailers, they will be given an account manager that is responsible for their account from live status through the relationship with PayRetailers. I mean, and what that does is it gives them one port of call that they can go to in order to get answers on any local regulation changes, trends in the market. And we're also proactive in approaching our merchants and telling them of potentially a new product that's become available, or things like that.
Yeah, and what I sounds maybe interesting, but what I always tell to my merchants, and I think this applies to all the businesses. I mean, everybody knows squirrels. They're intelligent, they're adaptable, and your business, especially for LATAM, needs to be very adaptable, because the rules and regulations can change from day to day. And if you are not that flexible or adaptable, I mean, it's going to be tough. So that's one of the things that I always would advise to our clients.
Yeah, and it's not just rules and regulations, it's also kind of cultural things, right? Because if you don't necessarily know the market, you might not necessarily know what kinds of products and services people are looking for. Is that something that you guys provide as well, advice in that regard?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I mean, from country to country, there's there are the cultural differences, and as I previously mentioned, while people believe that that Latin America is underbanked, and the people that struggle to pay online, the actual reason is the cultural differences can play a part in that. I mean, if you look at Colombia, for example, a Colombian, while they would use a credit card to pay for a flight online, in a social setting, paying with credit card might look like they can't afford to pay for the product.
Oh
And
my gosh.
therefore, socially, they wouldn't do that. So they would choose another payment option in order to do that. This information is information that we get from our colleagues who live there or are from there. And, that's very important to the information that we can then provide to the merchants.
Yeah, what we regularly do is we invite country managers, for example, to our calls. because I mean, Jonathan from the UK, I'm from the Netherlands, so we always get the, let's say, local support from the people over. I mean, we need it too, and in that way we kind of establish the roadmap.
Sure.
Wow. Okay, that is so interesting. I never ever would have known that. So so why is it really necessary to have a local presence in Latin America?
Well, looking at localization, on one hand, of course, language is going to be a thing. Positive
Mm,
thing. Looking at Europe, we have, I don't know how many languages, but there are a lot. In LATAM, people either speak Portuguese in Brazil or Spanish in the rest of the countries. So that is one thing in terms of local presence and localization that is really important.
mhm,
Um, on the other hand, if you're an international merchant and you're selling online goods, you can kind of rely on, like, say, our network. You don't have to have local presence specifically over there. You just need to make sure that your content is localized and that you accept the local payment methods. But if you are having a physical business, as in you sell jackets, fashion,
mm.
something like that, it could be very beneficial for you to have like local presence with some warehouses in the countries that you're operating.
I see. And yeah, Jonathan, do you have anything to add to that as well?
Yeah, no, I think I'd agree with Igor. You know, it's why is it necessary to have a local presence? It's not
Mhm,
necessarily necessary to have a local presence, and you know that's what pay retailers. You know, when entering into Latin America, if you're from Europe, you know some of the legal terms, it can seem like gobbledygook to somebody that wouldn't, you know, that doesn't understand it.
mhm,
And what we do is help merchants that don't have that presence understand what they might need to do, and really support them in entering the Latin American market. Yeah.
yeah. I'm sorry, I keep going back to this example that you had about people not wanting to pay with credit card in
Mhm.
Colombia. And that's, I think, a perfect example of why it's so necessary to have these diverse payment methods. Perhaps, to somebody like me who's an American, or, to you guys who are from the EU,
Exactly.
and from the UK, people who we're used to using PayPal and debit card and credit card, but these other parts of the world might need more diverse and unconventional payment methods. So, can you talk a little bit more about those different payment methods, and why it's so important to have them?
Yeah, sure. I mean, as you mentioned, you know, I think that's an important thing about working with a provider who's based, you know, that has people on the ground in the
Mm,
areas to really understand the cultural differences. Because while, you know, a payment is a payment, and it enables somebody to make a payment online, you know, understanding the complexes within the societies there and how things work and why they work, you know, is important for a merchant to target the right customer base. I mean, in
mm,
Brazil, for example, there's a bank transfer solution that's called Pix, and Pix is very largely used. I think, I mean, it's a huge percentage of online transactions in Brazil. And for a merchant entering Brazil, if they weren't to offer Pix, they're already at a disadvantage to competitors that do.
mm,
And then if you move over to Mexico, you know, cash-based solutions like OXXO, 7-Eleven, they, you know, very important to have. And, you know, without having those, you don't target the right parts of the customers, and that's what we're here to do, to advise based on that. And that's why we have the people on the ground to advise Igor and myself of what we should be selling to the merchants and how to advise them correctly.
mhm. And my next question is, okay, so now we have all this great information about localized payment methods, the strategy for going into these markets, establishing local suppliers. My next question is, who needs to be hearing this information? So in other words, what kinds of industries can benefit the most from entering into the Latin American market?
I think there's no straight answer to that. I think any business or any industry can benefit from entering into the Latin American market. The key is making sure that you know what region you want to be in, what kind of product is or what kind of service is popular in that region,
Mm,
or maybe you have something new and you need to get your marketing team working on getting that product launched in Brazil, for example. I mean, the general thing is people want to spend more and more money online. It's easy, and especially in last year with COVID, people couldn't leave their houses, so people needed to start spending more money online, and that is the key. So I mean, short, I think any type of business can enter into Latin American markets.
Yeah, and I think as the Latin American market grows as it is growing, you know, the customers have the means to pay online. You know, PayRetailers gives the options, and so the more that merchants realize that Latin America is, you know, does offer the opportunity that it does, you know, the more options there are for the customers. So, you know, that therefore drives the online economy in Latin America. You know, obviously without new merchants, without new industries, it kind of comes to a standstill. So, you know, what we do is, you know, hold people's hands in showing them that their presence also drives the business forward. Yeah.
Yeah, and I want to talk a little bit, you know, more about the specifics of the opportunities that are in this market. So, for example, revenue opportunities, the general size of the market, the number of online consumers, maybe something about growth prospects for this region. What can you give me?
Sure. Well, I mean, you know, when people think about Europe and the USA and they see them as mature markets, you know, fully grown, and LATAM as a really emerging market. And while that is the case, you know, within LATAM, there are different countries that evolve at different times. I mean, Brazil, for example, is a very well-established country. And then we see more up-and-coming markets like Chile. I mean, 5 years ago, Latin America had one of the lowest numbers of online transactions per capita. And by 2023, online sales are predicted to double from where they are now, with like a 30% year-on-year growth. So, you know, the opportunity there is, I mean, it's absolutely there, you know, but through innovation of payments, through the products being made available, but also accessibility for the customers to make those purchases online.
To add that, I think the whole COVID situation also accelerated the number of online consumers, where people were not familiar with buying online. People had to in the last year, so that definitely helped to grow the e-commerce market.
Yeah.
Right, and of course, also, you know, speaking of growth, you know, one of the most important things is, you know, that these people who are, as we've said a few times, unbanked are, you know, becoming banked or getting access to new kinds of financial services that just previously weren't possible because of geographical restrictions or technology. But now there's this huge wave of people that's coming in to the online e-commerce world for the first time. And I want to talk a little bit more with you both about how financial inclusion is playing a role in the growth of the Latin American market and the specific things that you guys have observed, and also how you are supporting that financial inclusion.
Yeah, so it works in two ways. So on one side, we try to educate the international merchants that don't know anything about the market. We can explain about the differences and how to give access to the people in LATAM to their goods. And I mean, the good thing is then people, it doesn't matter if you live in a big city like Mexico City or you live in the countryside of Peru, you as a merchant will give access to your products or services to practically anybody. Then on the other side is we try to engage with the consumers. So what we've done last year is we started a partnership with Comebol Sudamericana, and with that we try to, on one hand, present our brand to the consumers, but also show them that you can pay online with all these payment methods, and that they have access to all these merchants. And I think that is a really important thing in terms of showing and educating the consumers what are the possibilities.
Yeah, no, and I think just to add to that, you know, it comes back to what we were saying. You know, how does the financial inclusion play a role? It's you know, with what we were saying about in Colombia, you know, in the different countries, as the understanding of what is and isn't usual in those countries, you know, and therefore reflecting it in the product that's offered and the services that we're providing, we mirror what is requested on the ground and give that to our merchants in order that they can make the most out of what is a really growing market. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, exactly. And we talked a little bit about this in the last panel discussion that we had with you guys, but that you are pursuing sponsorships and partnerships with uh, South American football teams, as a way of sort of making connections with the local populations and establishing yourself in the cultural context of these places. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Exactly. So I mean, with CONMEBOL, as Igor mentioned, football in Latin America is like a religion. The
Hmm.
people they go love to watch it, and as e-commerce is growing, to see the presence of a payment solution,
Hmm.
it just shows that while we are doing the sponsorship, it shows the growth of payments in the region and how we reflect on a more cultural side to address the people, to open their eyes to the possibilities of that. Now they can actually be involved in e-commerce and they can make the purchases, and that's why we do it. While we're here as well to advise businesses on how to do business better in LATAM, we're also here to open the eyes of the people in the countries and say to them, that now the opportunity's there with PayRetailers to really start getting online.
Absolutely. And we're coming to the end of our planned questions, so I just want to remind our audience to ask any and all questions, submit comments that you might have on our discussion today, so that we can answer those. But before we move on to questions from our audience, I just want to ask you both for your final thoughts on this discussion. If there's something that you hope that people walk away from this discussion with today, what is it?
Sure.
I think
It's I mean, from my side, it's to see that while there are challenges in Latin America and it can seem like a mountain to enter, with the right support from ourselves at PayRetailers, we're constantly evolving our products and listening to the feedback of our merchants and our customers to understand, to really provide the right service and effectively hold the hand of a merchant when entering the market. Latin America, through its difficulties, it's a great opportunity for anybody that wants to increase sales, and anybody can feel free to contact myself or Igor after the call, and we'd be happy to walk them through that.
Yeah, I
And
agree. I agree on that, and I think what we should not forget is like the size of the market. I mean, it's huge in terms of the amount of people. It's huge in terms of the amount of countries, and if you're not there, I would just have a look and see if you can grow your business to Latin America.
Absolutely. Okay. So we're moving on to our very first question from the audience. So this is a question for both of you guys. From your experience, which country is the best Latin American country to enter the market in?
Yeah, I think as we mentioned, there isn't necessarily a best country to enter in Latin America. What we don't do is sort of a one thing fits all kind of solution.
Mhm.
What we'd do is we'd talk to a merchant about the product that they're offering, what it is, is it a physical good, is it a digital good, and then we would advise them based on that, and our experience, where we feel it's best for them to enter. Of course, if that didn't align with their expectation or their wishes, we can discuss that and work out the best port of call for them. But I don't think there is, while there are bigger markets and smaller markets, there is no best market to enter with.
Mhm.
And to add to that, like if you're already selling in Europe, in Spain, for example, you've done half of the work because you have a Spanish website, maybe need some tweaking. But in the end, you can use that as the basis going to certain countries in LATAM. Or if you're selling in Portugal, you already have everything in Portuguese, which will definitely help copying that over to the Brazilian market, for example. So if you already have things that you use in Europe, you can definitely use that in Latin America.
Okay. Thank you so much. Okay, and then another question from our audience. Can you talk about the onboarding process of from the beginning of starting talking to you guys to actually starting to offer payments and services to customers in the Latin American market? What does that look like on a practical level?
Sure. I mean, the onboarding process, once we've had an initial call to discuss, the merchant's needs and show them what is possible in the different countries, we will go through the process of KYC. Of course, our KYC process is very straightforward. There's direct communication with the compliance team, and it's a very standard KYC procedure. After that, contracting and credentials are sent out. At this point, we then introduce the merchant to our technical team. So our merchant is, and this is normally through a Skype group. So the technical team is always available for the merchant through the integration to make sure that it's streamlined, up and running, and going smoothly. And then, once that's happened, it's a matter of switching everything live, making sure that the testing's done so everything's in place, and off we go.
Right, and you mentioned the technical team that gets onto another question here. So the technical team is available to merchants through the onboarding process. What kind of technical support do your customers have after the onboarding process?
Well, our technical team will help with any changes that need to be made in the integration, and it all depends a little bit on how you do the integration. I mean, we have 4 different ways of doing that, which goes from a paywall to a hard-coded integration. If you use our paywall, I mean, there's not really a lot to integrate. It works pretty well with a redirect. If you have the hard-coded integration, then it's always a collaboration between the account managers, the client, and the technical team, seeing like, are we going to change the payment methods? What do we need to change, and what is necessary for that? Well, we will share, or the technical team will share the documentation and kind of guide you step by step if necessary.
Okay. And this next question is about regulation. So, in terms of regulations that are relevant for financial technology companies, challenger banks, payment providers, what are you seeing in terms of trends in the Latin American market?
A few things. While some things are not regulated, many things are, and I always try to see that like in a positive way, because if you know what to do, you cannot do it wrong, and you know how to do it, like the integration, make sure what licenses you need, etc. So it depends a little bit on the type of business that you have, of course. But I mean, if it's financial services and you need a license in country X, Y, or Z, if that is clear, then we will advise you in terms of like, maybe you should have a look there, and there, getting that license so you can start processing in these countries. But I mean, for me, regulations, it's a good thing, because you know exactly what you can and what you can't do. Where if it's not regulated, then I mean, it can be difficult, to understand what is necessary.
Absolutely. And Jonathan, do you have anything to add to that as well?
Yeah, I think as I mentioned earlier, as we're members of the FinTech Association, while different countries do begin to become more stringent with certain business models, we're always on top of those changes. And again, if there's somebody out there that would want to understand more about their particular business model and any regulations that might be coming into play for them, we just ask that they can get in touch with us. Our details will be available shortly, and we're happy to help them for sure.
Yes, and that's all of those questions for the audience that we have today. So quickly, I'll ask you both a little bit about those details. And of course, to our audience members, the follow-up email from this webinar will contain all the information that you need to get in touch with PayRetailers. But here we have it on the screen as well. Jonathan and Igor, I want to thank you guys both personally for this discussion. You guys are the real deal. It's always a pleasure to talk with you both.
Yeah, thank you very much, Rachel. And, thanks to everybody that's listening. As I mentioned, we're here. If you do have any questions about what we've discussed, feel free to write to Igor and myself, and we'd be more than happy to get back to you, jump on a call, and see how we at PayRetailers can help you.
Yeah, definitely. And for the people that want to meet us in person, next week we'll be at the IFX Expo in Cyprus. So if anyone's going there, just send us an email or just come to our booth, and then we can have like an in-person conversation.
Absolutely. And a big thank you to you both. Thank you to our audience. That's all from us today. For more information about other webinars, panel discussions, news, events, and much, much more, visit us at financemagnates.com. Thank you all and have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.